Tomorrow is a big day for Elizabeth Holmes. She has one shot to convince this judge to grant her a new trial based on the testimony of Adam Rosendorf. Was he truthful? Did he give truthful testimony in the trial of Elizabeth Holmes? Did he feel manipulated by the government in his testimony in the Elizabeth Holmes trial? Those are the two big questions that this evidentiary hearing tomorrow will hopefully answer, as to what did Adam Rosendorf mean by those statements that he made to William Evans when he showed up unannounced at Elizabeth Holmes' house. What did he say in the declaration that he made after he showed up at Elizabeth Holmes' house? Were they consistent? Is there missing information? I'm going to give you my analysis and tell you that it depends on what Adam Rosendorf testifies to tomorrow and to whether or not Elizabeth Holmes gets a new trial. Why did he show up at her house? Why was he so compelled to meet with her? Those are big questions. And whether or not this jeopardizes the convictions of Elizabeth Holmes. So hi there, I'm Michele Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and a former prosecutor. You may recognize me because I provided a lot of legal analysis on the Elizabeth Holmes case. So this video is simply for education information, simply my opinion. I want to know what your opinion is. Do you think she's going to get a new trial? Do you think the judge is going to grant this new trial? Please leave a comment or question and hit that like button. Please do subscribe to this channel, support my work, and please do share these videos. Okay, so what we're going to look at is we're going to compare the statements that Adam Rosendorf made, those driveway statements I call them. And by the way, you might want to go look at my previous video I did on the Elizabeth Holmes new trial hearing. That'll fill you in, but I'm going to go through those statements that Adam Rosendorf made to William Evans when he intercepted him as Adam Rosendorf was approaching the front door of Elizabeth Holmes' home. And they had two conversations. We're going to talk about those statements. Then we're going to compare them with the sworn declaration that Adam Rosendorf made under penalty of perjury about 5 weeks after that driveway conversation. Okay? So, thank you again to all of those who have subscribed, and welcome to all of those of you new analyzers, new subscribers. Okay, so in case you popped onto this channel, let me fill you in a little bit. So Elizabeth Holmes was the CEO of Theranos, a blood testing company that she started. And in January of 2022, she was convicted of 4 counts of wire fraud. Those counts relate to one conspiring with the COO, Sunny Balwani, who was tried separately and convicted of all 12 counts. Elizabeth was convicted of 4 counts, one relating to conspiring with Sunny Balwani to defraud investors, and then 3 counts she was convicted of defrauding individual investors. She was acquitted on the patient-related counts, and 3 of the investor counts the jury was undecided on, so those are still out there. Okay, but she has filed, like many defendants, a motion for a new trial or an evidentiary hearing where she's asking the judge. She had several reasons why she wanted to have a new trial, but the judge granted the evidentiary hearing relating to the statements that Adam Rosendorf made in the driveway back in August, 7 months after Elizabeth Holmes was convicted. He tried to contact her. And those statements it's a long shot, and it all depends on how he testifies tomorrow and what he says. It's a long shot, but she could get a new trial. And if the judge grants a new trial, that means those convictions are tossed out, start all over again. If she is denied this new trial, she, like every defendant, has a right to appeal. And I'll tell you this whole encounter with Adam Rosendorf will definitely be an issue on appeal, okay? There aren't any cases on point. And as the judge said in the hearing that he had relating to whether or not to grant this evidentiary hearing, the judge said in his career sitting as a judge, he's never heard of a witness contacting, and he referred to Elizabeth Holmes as a convicted felon, contacting a convicted felon after they had testified. Neither had the defense counsel. Well, in my experience, dealing with many cases and many trials, I dealt with a lot of prosecuting child abusers, child molesters, domestic prosecution of domestic violence cases where family members or witnesses would recontact the convicted defendant. So that did happen, has happened in my experience, but not to the statements that were made by Adam Rosendorf in the driveway, those driveway statements. So, want to give you a sentencing update. So, Elizabeth Holmes' sentence is scheduled for November 18th. Sunny Balwani's remains on November 15th. So that week, November 15th, November 18th, they're both going to be sentenced. And there was on calendar for October 31st a motion to quash by the defense. That appears to be off calendar, so it looks like that matter was resolved. It could have had something to do with sentencing. I don't know. Okay, so let's go ahead and analyze. Let's compare what's in that declaration that Adam Rosendorf made 5 weeks after, and that declaration was included in the motion, the opposition that the government filed opposing Elizabeth Holmes' request for a new trial and this evidentiary hearing that the judge granted. And that was a big win for Elizabeth Holmes to get this evidentiary hearing, because anything could happen in this evidentiary hearing. It could open, it could muddy the waters regarding Adam Rosendorf's testimony. We don't know yet, okay? So, and this boils down to whether or not Elizabeth Holmes got a fair trial. So if Adam Rosendorf gave false testimony, or that the government submitted false evidence by this false testimony allegedly by Adam Rosendorf, if he's recanting his testimony, and the jury doesn't know about this, right? The jury didn't know about these driveway statements, about how he felt he had done something wrong, and we'll get into that. Was Elizabeth Holmes denied a fair trial? That's the 6th Amendment and the 14th Amendment that every defendant is guaranteed in the United States, okay? So that's what it comes down to. One of the issues of whether or not she was denied a fair trial is whether or not there was a witness who gave false testimony. Did he lie? Was he truthful? Was Rosendorf truthful? If the jury had known that he's recanting, that he gave false testimony, would they have convicted? Now, I said in the prior video, the new trial video, and I encourage you to look at that there's still overwhelming evidence, in my opinion. Erica Chung, several of the other lab employees, other employees of Theranos corroborated what Adam Rosendorf said about whether or not the technology was accurate and reliable. And I understand that the government says that whether or not those statements that Adam Rosendorf made doesn't pertain to any of the investor counts, the convictions. I respectfully disagree, because in the indictment, one of the allegations is relating to the investor counts that Holmes and Balwani made false statements regarding the testimony. They made false misrepresentations regarding the accuracy and the reliability of the technology. Now, we don't know how the jury came to their conclusion to convict Elizabeth Holmes. In fact, we're not allowed to ask a jury, how did you come up with your reasons for convicting her? We're not allowed to know what happened in deliberations. If the jury or a juror comes forward and tells us, that's another story, but we're not allowed to probe that, okay? So this, according to the government, this evidentiary hearing is a fishing expedition. A fishing expedition. That's what the government is saying by the defense. The defense is saying, no, we want to know what Adam Rosendorf meant, and Elizabeth Holmes is entitled to find out whether or not he gave false testimony when he testified in the Elizabeth Holmes case. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to walk you through, remind you of those statements that he made in the driveway to William Evans. And we're going to look at, is it consistent with the declaration that he made 5 weeks later? That sworn declaration. So I'm going to walk you through that as well. All right. So please hit that like button. Please do subscribe. Support my work by subscribing. And please do leave your analysis. I want to know. Put it in the comments. Do you think these statements are consistent? What do you think, Adam Rosen? How do you think it's going to go for Adam Rosendorf? Do you think the judge is going to grant this new trial request for Elizabeth Holmes? All right, so let's go ahead, take a look at what happened. Why was Adam Rosendorf compelled to see Elizabeth Holmes? That's what the defense wants to know. So on August 8th, 2022, 7 months later approximately, from the verdict, Adam Rosendorf, who was a key witness for the prosecution in the Elizabeth Holmes case, left a voicemail for one of the defense counsel, and then about an hour and 15 minutes later, he showed up at Elizabeth Holmes' house unannounced. He just showed up. There were 2 short conversations according to the declaration, and according to this, which was filed in a motion when Elizabeth Holmes requested that she be granted a new trial based on what happened, the statements that Adam Rosendorf made. So what did Adam Rosendorf say, and why does it matter? Number 1, he tried to answer questions honestly at Ms. Holmes' trial. Well, tried to answer? So did you answer those questions correctly or not? He tried, okay? Number 2, the government made things seem worse than they were. Well, what does that mean? What exactly did the government do that made things seem worse than they were? Please tell us, Dr. Rosendorf. Number 3, everyone at Theranos was working hard to do something good and meaningful. Well, the defense is already saying, that relates to if everyone was working hard to do something good, then how could Elizabeth Holmes have the intent to defraud anyone if they were working to do something good, assuming everyone includes Elizabeth Holmes? Okay, number 4, he felt that he had done something wrong. Dr. Rosendorf, what did you do wrong? Please explain. Do you see what I'm getting at? The questions that he may be facing tomorrow at this hearing. What did he mean that he had felt he had done something wrong? What in particular did you do wrong? Number 5, he wanted to talk to Ms. Holmes. Number 6, he thought a conversation with Ms. Holmes would be healing for both of them. And both she and he were young at the time of the events, and these concerns were weighing on him to the point he had difficulty sleeping. So that's why he went over to Elizabeth Holmes' house. Now let's look and see, compare it to the declaration that he swore under penalty of perjury. This was filed by the court. Okay, so let's go through the declaration. I, Adam Rosendorf, declare, basically, under penalty of perjury, that's Section 28 U.S.C., United States Code. He was subpoenaed to testify at trial, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go down to paragraph 3. During my testimony in Ms. Holmes' trial, I answered every question put to me completely accurately and truthfully to the best of my ability. Well, he said he tried to answer things correctly. Now he's saying he answered them to best to his ability. I answered every question put to me. You see how there's a little bit of a difference here. Nothing, and I have to look at my notes here. Dr. Rosendorf, you signed this declaration under penalty of perjury. You understand that everything in here is a complete, an accurate recollection of everything that occurred, right? Well, you didn't put in this declaration. You're not disputing that you made those statements to William Evans in the driveway. It's not in your declaration here. You're not disputing. You're not disputing one word. So all those statements that were made to William Evans were true. That you felt that you were doing something wrong. See what I'm getting at? Okay, so, and then they could also launch, the defense could ask a plethora of questions about this declaration. Dr. Rosendorf, did you write this declaration? Okay, if the government wrote it, did you read through it? Did you make any corrections? Did you edit any of it? Did you change any of it? Did you ask any questions of the government before you signed this? What were those questions? So he says, I answered every question put to me completely accurately and truthfully to the best of my ability. Well, is your ability to change now? Is there something you want to say differently about your testimony at the trial? Nothing I have learned since giving my testimony has changed my recollection of the events. Well, didn't he say that he felt that he had done something wrong? Didn't he say that the government tried to make everyone look bad? Isn't that different? Isn't that changing his recollection? I stand by my testimony at Ms. Holmes and Mr. Balwani's trial in every respect. Well, then why are you saying that you felt that you had done something wrong? What does that mean? Okay, paragraph 4. The only instruction the government has given me in connection with this case is to tell the truth about the events I witnessed. All right, now I supervised a lot of trial attorneys. I've trained a lot. I've tried cases myself. And attorneys always get nervous when they're preparing witnesses, right? What happens when the opposing counsel asks, about witness preparation? So again, there could be a plethora of questions about this. And attorneys always get nervous, and witnesses get nervous when they're asked questions like, what kind of preparation? And the witness comes back, well, I was told to tell the truth, which is exactly what Rosendorf is saying he was instructed by the government to do. But my question would be, the only instruction the government has given to me in connection with this case is to tell the truth. Well, how did that come up, Dr. Rosendorf? Did you ask the government whether or not you should be telling the truth? How did this conversation take place? Why did this even come up as to whether or not you were to tell the truth? You're sworn to tell the truth. You took an oath to tell the truth when you testified. You see what I'm getting at? They can make a lot of hay, right? This could be a fishing expedition, but this could also muddy the waters in the conviction, all right? So I have no reason to believe that the government misrepresented or otherwise created a misimpression about Ms. Holmes' conduct. Well, didn't you say that he tried to answer the questions honestly at Ms. Holmes' trial, but the government tried to make everyone look bad? Well, what does that mean? You're saying here you have no reason to believe the government misrepresented, yet you said in the driveway to William Evans that the government tried to make everyone look bad? Do you see how those possibly could be inconsistent statements? And what doesn't he say here? He doesn't say he had no reason to believe. He says, I have no reason to believe that he didn't say that I made any misrepresentations. See, there's a difference. And again, in this declaration, what's not in this declaration is that he's not saying that he told the truth when he talked to William Evans, the driveway statements. He's not telling us that those were untruthful. He's not denying that he made those statements to William Evans, but are they consistent with this declaration? So we'll see what the defense does with these statements. All right, let's get to paragraph 5. Nevertheless, I feel compassion for Ms. Holmes and even more so for the members of their families who were not responsible for their conduct but will be affected by the punishment they may receive. Well, what does he know about the punishment? Did Adam Rosendorf know? To me, this isn't a good sign for Elizabeth Holmes because this indicates to me that Adam Rosendorf may have had discussions with the government as to the possible sentence that Elizabeth Holmes is facing. This could be just a generic statement. But what's interesting here is he says, I feel compassion. It's not about healing that he said in the driveway, or not about his difficulty sleeping that he said in the driveway. Now it's about compassion for Ms. Holmes and Mr. Balwani, and even more so for the members of their families. Well, he didn't contact Elizabeth Holmes' family members. He didn't contact her mother or her father. He went directly to Elizabeth Holmes' house and he wanted to meet with Elizabeth Holmes. He didn't say in that voicemail to the defense counsel, and he didn't say in the driveway that he wanted to talk to William Evans or to Elizabeth Holmes's mother or to Elizabeth Holmes's father. Do you see what I'm getting at? He said he went there because he had compassion for Elizabeth Holmes. Well, in the driveway, he said he couldn't sleep. He was having difficulty sleeping, and he wanted to meet with Elizabeth Holmes because he wanted to have healing for both of them. Do you see what I'm getting at? So anything could happen tomorrow. Anything could happen tomorrow. And again, this is signed by Adam Rosendorf, Walnut Creek, on September 15th. So approximately 5 weeks after. And I presume this declaration was made at the request of the government. Okay, is it consistent? What's missing? So let me also, indicate to you that I'm sure the defense might argue that this declaration is proof that the government is manipulating the testimony. And again, this is an allegation, and it's very difficult to get convictions overturned by prosecutorial misconduct. And again, it's just an allegation. The government denies that there was any misconduct, Okay, but the defense is going to argue this was a carefully crafted declaration made by the government for Adam Rosendorf to sign. The other thing that the defense may or may not be able to get into tomorrow at the evidentiary hearing is that Adam Rosendorf worked for 3 labs that were also investigated and may currently be investigated by the government. Now, could Adam Rosendorf feel that he was manipulated by the government in his testimony in the Holmes case? Now, granted, this came up in the trial because I watched it, in the Elizabeth Holmes trial. In the court, the judge was very careful on what the defense was able to get into, relating to the investigations of the labs that Adam Rosendorf also worked in. It was very minimal testimony that came in, okay? But now that we have these driveway statements in this declaration and an inquiry, specific inquiry as to whether or not Adam Rosendorf felt manipulated, well, could the fact that Adam Rosendorf's role or those labs may still be under the investigation by the government, could that weigh on the testimony? Could that make it more relevant as opposed to prejudicial, which is why it was kept out in the Elizabeth Holmes case? You see what I'm getting at? Okay, so the other things, Adam Rosendorf in the declaration, he didn't deny that he was compelled to speak to Elizabeth Holmes. He didn't deny anything that was in William Evans' declaration. He didn't change one word and didn't dispute any of the words. So all those statements that were made in the driveway, those statements were made by Adam Rosendorf. He didn't address in his declaration, which the defense pointed out several times, he didn't address or explain in that declaration what he meant by those statements in the driveway. Was he recanting his testimony? He didn't say in the declaration, I am not recanting my testimony. He said he stood by it, but yet he said he tried to answer, and then he says he gave complete. Okay, so we'll see how that turns out tomorrow. What did he mean by he felt he'd done something wrong? What did he mean by he tried to answer the questions truthfully? You either did or you didn't. He doesn't say that he gave false testimony, right? He didn't say that he gave truthful testimony. Let's see, what else do I have here? So, it's going to be interesting what he testifies to tomorrow, whether or not this is going to persuade or convince a judge to give Elizabeth Holmes a new trial. But I'll tell you this much. There's this, this is a win for Elizabeth Holmes having this evidentiary hearing because Rosendorf could say anything. There could also be more, what he testifies to could give them more information for a basis for her appeal. Okay? So it's a benefit for the defense to be having this evidentiary hearing. Granted, Rosendorf could get on the stand and say, yeah, I told the truth. No, I didn't feel compelled or manipulated. I'm sorry. No, I didn't feel manipulated by the government when I testified. He could deny it outright. But the defense is still going to be asking him, I'm sure, a lot of questions. In this new trial, this hearing tomorrow is a full day. The court has provided the whole day where Adam Rosendorf, I'm sure, will be asked a lot of questions by the defense. I'm sure he's going to be rehabilitated by the government. The government's going to point out the fact that he did answer these questions truthfully. His testimony was truthful. He stands by it. They'll be reinforcing any possibility of inconsistencies between the statements in the driveway and the declaration. Okay, so what do you think? How do you think the judge is going to rule tomorrow? Do you think he's going to give Elizabeth Holmes a new trial? And by the way, the judge has already indicated that October 24th, both sides have an opportunity, depending on what goes down tomorrow, both sides have an opportunity to file a response with the judge for him to consider before he issues his decision on whether or not Elizabeth Holmes gets a new trial based on what happens with Adam Rosendorf's testimony. And that decision, the judge has indicated, will be issued approximately October 31st to November 3rd, sometime in there. The judge could issue his written decision earlier than that. We'll see. So let me know, what's your analysis? What inconsistencies, or what did you see that was consistent? Do you think the declaration was consistent? Do you think there was missing information? Do you think those driveway statements hurt or helped the testimony? And again, the judge still has to consider those 5 factors on whether or not to give a new trial. And please do look at the video I did on the new trial where I walk you through, but it's that last factor. Whether or not this information, this new evidence, the driveway statements, the declaration, and by the way, I'm sure the defense is going to get into what kind of witness preparation did they do of Rosendorf before he testified. Okay? So that last factor is where would it be possible that the jury would have acquitted Elizabeth Holmes had they known about maybe Adam Rosendorf recanting his testimony, giving false testimony? All those statements that he said in the driveway would have led the jury to acquit, or a reasonable, possibility that the jury would have acquitted. And I'm sure the prosecution is going to argue no, because of all that corroborating testimony, all those other witnesses that corroborated what Adam Rosendorf said about what happened with the accuracy and the reliability of the technology. Okay? So we'll see what happens. That's a tough factor to meet. Would it have led to the acquittal had they known this? Because there is case law. If a witness does recant, but if there's overwhelming or other corroborating evidence to support the convictions, those convictions are upheld. But what's not on point here is there isn't any cases where, in this fact pattern, when a witness shows up after the conviction and makes statements that could put a question mark in a juror's mind about whether or not they should believe this witness and whether or not they should believe the case presented by the government. Okay, so we'll see what happens. It's a long shot, but it's a possibility for Elizabeth Holmes that she could get a new trial. We'll see what happens tomorrow when Adam Rosendorf testifies, and whether or not the judge gives Elizabeth Holmes a new trial or denies it, or whether or not the judge is just making sure that he covers all bases, which I'm sure he is. But anything could happen in this Elizabeth Holmes trial. Okay? So please do leave your comment or question. I want to know what your analysis. Please support my work by subscribing. And thank you to all of those of you who have subscribed. And stay tuned. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Thanks for watching.